The world saw a hero, but I saw my father, and the truth is far more complicated. Kelly Stewart. For decades, Jimmy Stewart was Hollywood's golden boy, the charming everyman, the war hero, the devoted family man. But was that the full story? His daughter Kelly Stewart is finally breaking her silence, revealing truths about her father that challenge everything we thought we knew. Behind the cameras, Stewart battled demons that haunted him till his final days. What did Hollywood never see? How did the war change him? And why did he retreat from the world after losing the love of his life? The answers will leave you speechless. Before we uncover Kelly's truth about her father, let's first understand who Jimmy Stewart was. Jimmy Stewart wasn't born into fame, he wasn't groomed for Hollywood or raised among the glitz of show business. Instead, his story begins in the quiet town of Indiana, Pennsylvania, where life was simple and values ran deep. His father, Alexander Stewart, owned a hardware store, and his mother, Elizabeth, was a devoted homemaker. The Stewarts were a deeply rooted family, instilling in young Jimmy a sense of discipline, integrity, and respect, qualities that would define him long after he left his hometown. But Stewart wasn't the rambunctious, outgoing type. He was thoughtful, reserved, and carried an introspective nature even as a child. He spent hours building model airplanes and sketching designs, convinced he would one day become an engineer. Acting wasn't even on his radar until fate intervened. The first time Stewart found himself captivated by the world of performance was through his mother's love for music. She would often play the piano at home, filling their house with melodies that sparked something in him. Encouraged by teachers who saw his potential, Stewart participated in school plays, and though he was initially hesitant, the stage awakened a side of him he never knew existed. By the time he reached college, his aspirations had shifted. Attending Princeton University, he initially pursued architecture, believing it was a stable and respectable career. But the pull of storytelling was too strong. While at Princeton, he joined the Triangle Club, a theatrical group that staged elaborate productions. It was here that he truly found his voice, not just as an actor, but as someone who could command an audience with an understated yet powerful presence. His performances caught the attention of faculty and peers alike, and slowly he began to realize that his future lay beyond blueprints and buildings. After graduating in 1932, the world was still reeling from the effects of the Great Depression. Jobs were scarce, and financial security seemed like an illusion. While many around him clung to practical careers, Stewart took a risk. He packed his bags and headed to New York, determined to make it in Broadway's cutthroat world. But success didn't come easy. His tall, lanky frame and soft-spoken demeanor weren't the typical trademarks of leading men at the time. Casting directors weren't sure what to make of him. He landed small roles in summer stock productions, scraping by with whatever work he could find. Some nights he went to bed hungry. Other nights he questioned if he had made a mistake. Still, Stewart refused to give up. Each rejection fueled him to push harder, refine his craft, and find a way to stand out. Slowly, opportunities trickled in. He formed connections with other aspiring actors, including Henry Fonda, who would become one of his closest friends. And then, after years of struggling on stage, Hollywood finally took notice. Hollywood was waiting, but fame would come with its own set of challenges. Hollywood wasn't waiting with open arms when Jimmy Stewart arrived. His tall, wiry frame and shy demeanor didn't fit the mold of the traditional leading man. Casting agents weren't sure what to do with him. He wasn't rugged like Clark Gable or suave like Cary Grant. He was different, an everyday man with a natural sincerity that set him apart. But in an industry obsessed with image, that wasn't necessarily an advantage. Stewart started small, securing minor roles in films that barely registered with audiences. His early days were filled with uncertainty, rejection, and the kind of brutal competition that crushed many aspiring actors before they ever got a real chance. He worked relentlessly, taking on any role he could, from playing a newspaper reporter in The Murder Man, 1935, to appearing in forgettable B-movies that barely made a dent in the industry. Then, in 1938, everything changed. Frank Capra, one of Hollywood's most visionary directors, saw something in Stewart that others had overlooked. Capra cast him in You Can't Take It With You, a film that showcased Stewart's unique ability to be both vulnerable and charismatic. It was a box office hit, but more importantly, it proved that Stewart had what it took to lead a film. His next major role would cement his place in cinematic history. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, was the defining moment of his early career. The film, in which Stewart played an idealistic young senator fighting against corruption, struck a nerve with audiences. His performance was raw, passionate, and utterly believable. He wasn't just acting, he was embodying something real. That role earned him his first Academy Award nomination and turned him into a household name. But Stewart wasn't done. The following year, he starred in The Philadelphia Story alongside Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. This time, he wasn't just the underdog, he was confident, charming, and quick-witted. The film was a massive success, and Stewart won his first Academy Award for Best Actor. In just a few short years, he had gone from a struggling stage actor to one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Yet, there was something about Stewart that made him stand out from his peers. Unlike other actors who carefully curated their public personas, he seemed effortlessly genuine. Audiences saw themselves in him. He was the friend, the neighbor, the person you could trust. But was that all there was to him? Hollywood painted him as the perfect American hero. But was there a side to Jimmy Stewart that the world never saw? But just as he reached the peak of his career, the world was on the brink of war. At the height of his career, when most actors clung to their fame, Jimmy Stewart made a decision that stunned Hollywood. He walked away from the bright lights and enlisted in the US Army Air Corps. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a symbolic gesture. Stewart wasn't content playing heroes on screen, he wanted to be one in real life. But there was one problem: his fame. The military saw Stewart as a valuable propaganda tool, someone who could inspire enlistments just by posing in a uniform. But that wasn't what he wanted. He fought for an active role, pushing to be more than just a morale booster. His persistence paid off. He was assigned to pilot training and eventually became a squadron leader, flying dangerous combat missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. Unlike many Hollywood stars who participated in war efforts from a safe distance, Stewart flew straight into enemy fire. He led bombing raids over Germany, braving anti-aircraft fire and the constant risk of never making it back. His missions were among the deadliest of the war. He wasn't just another soldier, he was a commander, leading men into battles that would determine the fate of the world. But war changes a man. The horrors of combat left deep scars, ones that Stewart rarely spoke about. Those close to him knew the truth. He suffered from crippling nightmares and the weight of the men he lost. He returned home a different person, carrying burdens that even Hollywood couldn't erase. He was still the Jimmy Stewart that audiences loved, but something behind his eyes had shifted. When he stepped back into Hollywood, the world had changed, and so had he. He struggled to find his place again, but the war had made him more than just a star. It had forged him into something greater. And yet, despite everything he had accomplished, there was still one thing missing in his life. But while the world saw a hero, Stewart still longed for something deeper: love and family. For years, Jimmy Stewart was Hollywood's most eligible bachelor. While other leading men were quick to marry, Stewart remained elusive, his name linked to a string of glamorous co-stars. But no relationship ever seemed to last. Some whispered that he was too shy, too cautious, or perhaps even uninterested in love altogether. Others speculated that his war experience had left him unwilling to settle down. Whatever the reason, he earned a reputation as the Great American Bachelor, and many wondered if he would ever find the right woman. Then came Gloria Hattrick McLean, the woman who would change everything. Their meeting wasn't a grand Hollywood affair. It wasn't staged for cameras or arranged by studio executives. It happened at a dinner party, and for Stewart, it was love at first sight. Gloria was stunning, poised, and unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't an actress clawing for the spotlight. She was a socialite, a former model, and a woman with a life entirely her own. But their love story wasn't without complications. Gloria had been married before and had 2 young sons from her previous marriage. In an era where traditional family values were deeply ingrained, this posed a challenge. Stewart's friends worried, would he be willing to take on an instant family after years of independence? Even Gloria had her doubts, fearing that Hollywood's most famous bachelor might struggle to adjust. But Stewart surprised everyone. When they married in 1949, he embraced Gloria's children as his own, proving that his love for her extended beyond romance. It was about family. In many ways, Gloria was exactly what Stewart needed. She was confident, strong-willed, and unwavering in her support. Unlike the women he had dated in Hollywood, she wasn't drawn to him because of his fame. She loved him for who he was, and that made all the difference. Their marriage wasn't just another Hollywood love story, it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and deep devotion. While so many of his peers endured scandals, divorces, and affairs, Stewart and Gloria remained rock solid for over 4 decades. But while marriage brought him the stability he had always longed for, fatherhood would soon change him in ways he never expected. Marriage brought happiness, but fatherhood would transform him in unexpected ways. To the world, Jimmy Stewart was the picture of warmth, integrity, and kindness. But to his children, he was something more, something both beautiful and complicated. Kelly Stewart, his daughter, remembers a father who was present yet distant, loving yet reserved. Unlike Hollywood fathers who basked in the spotlight with their children, Stewart never pushed his family into the public eye. He wasn't the type to read bedtime stories or hover over homework. He didn't shower his kids with constant affection, nor did he engage in long, heart-to-heart conversations. But in his quiet way, he made sure they always knew they were loved. Kelly recalls that her father had a routine. When he wasn't working, he preferred the simple joys of home, walking the family dogs, tending to his garden, or sitting in his favorite chair with a book in hand. He wasn't one for extravagant gestures, but small moments held great meaning. She remembers how he would greet them with a gentle smile, or how he would sit in silence, just enjoying their company. But balancing Hollywood fame and fatherhood was never easy. The demands of the film industry often pulled him away for months at a time. He missed birthdays, holidays, and school recitals, not because he wanted to, but because the life of a movie star offered little room for normalcy. Then, tragedy struck. Stewart's stepson, Ronald McLean, was killed in action in Vietnam in 1969. The news shattered him. He had always supported the military, serving with honor himself, but losing his son on the battlefield was an unbearable reality. He struggled to come to terms with the loss, knowing there was nothing he could do to change it. Friends and family noticed a shift. His once unwavering spirit dimmed, his silences grew longer, and a part of him seemed to withdraw from the world. Despite the pain, Stewart never let grief define his family. He remained devoted to his wife and children, finding solace in the quiet stability of home. Kelly Stewart later admitted that her father wasn't a typical, hands-on dad, but she never doubted his love for them. In his way, through his actions rather than his words, he showed his devotion in ways only he could. But Kelly's insights reveal an even deeper truth about Jimmy Stewart, the burden of fame, and the quiet battles he fought behind closed doors. But Kelly's insights reveal an even deeper truth about Jimmy Stewart, the burden of famine and the quiet battles he fought. To the world, Jimmy Stewart was the embodiment of integrity. He was the kind, honorable man who stood up for justice in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and the heartwarming hero of It's a Wonderful Life. He never seemed to stumble, never got caught in scandals, and never let fame get to his head. But was he as perfect as Hollywood made him out to be? Behind the scenes, Stewart carried burdens that few ever saw. He understood that his public image was his greatest asset, but also his greatest trap. Studios depended on his reputation, audiences idolized him, and even fellow actors saw him as the gold standard. He had to be the American hero, both on and off the screen. But Kelly Stewart saw the side of him that the cameras never captured. She saw the moments of doubt, the quiet anxieties, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He was a perfectionist in everything he did, often agonizing over his performances long after filming had wrapped. He worried about his career choices, afraid that one role could tarnish the image he had spent decades building. Hollywood wasn't an easy place to exist, even for someone like Stewart. The industry was changing, and the kind of movies he had built his career on were no longer guaranteed hits. By the 1960s and 70s, Hollywood had shifted toward grittier, edgier storytelling, something that didn't always align with his persona. He was offered fewer roles, and those he did take were often scrutinized. He began to wonder, was he becoming obsolete? Then there were the psychological scars that never fully healed from the war. Stewart rarely spoke about his experiences in combat, but those closest to him knew that the memories lingered. He had seen friends die, had led men into battle knowing some wouldn't return, and had carried the weight of those missions for the rest of his life. His nightmares never truly faded, and at times he struggled to shake the ghosts of his past. Despite his struggles, Stewart never let his pain overshadow his career or family. He never became bitter, never lashed out, never let the darkness consume him. He kept moving forward, but the burden of Hollywood, war, and personal loss never fully left him. And yet, even as he quietly stepped back from the limelight, his legacy only grew stronger. as he stepped away from the spotlight, his legacy only grew stronger. As the cameras dimmed and the scripts stopped arriving, Jimmy Stewart embraced the quiet life he had always craved. No longer the leading man of Hollywood's golden era, he found solace in his poetry, his family, and the simple joys of home. His days were spent reading, reminiscing, and occasionally writing heartfelt verses that revealed more of his soul than he ever had in interviews. His love for aviation never faded, and he continued to reflect on his time in the skies, both in war and in peace. But after the loss of his beloved wife Gloria in 1994, Stewart was never quite the same. The woman who had been his rock for over 4 decades was gone, and without her the world seemed quieter and lonelier. Friends noticed his spirit had changed. He spoke less, smiled less, and spent more time in solitude. It was as if a part of him had left with her. By 1997, Stewart's health had declined. He battled heart problems and struggled with the weight of old age. Then, on July 2nd, the world lost a legend. At 89 years old, Jimmy Stewart passed away peacefully in his Beverly Hills home, leaving behind a legacy few could ever match. The response was overwhelming. Over 3,000 mourners gathered to say their final goodbyes, including Hollywood's biggest names and military figures who had admired his service. President Bill Clinton called him a national treasure. The industry paid tribute in the only way they knew how, by replaying his greatest films, reminding the world of the magic he had created. But to Kelly Stewart, he was never just a legend, he was her father. In her eyes, he wasn't just the man on the silver screen or the decorated war hero. He was the quiet, loving presence who had shaped her life in ways only a father could. She wishes people knew the depth of his kindness, the way he carried the weight of his experiences without complaint, and the simple moments that made him human. More than anything, she wants the world to remember that Jimmy Stewart wasn't just a Hollywood icon. He was a man who lived with honor, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy far greater than the films he starred in. But even today, his impact is undeniable. Decades after his passing, Jimmy Stewart's impact remains as strong as ever. His films are still celebrated, his military service continues to inspire, and his unwavering values stand as a testament to the kind of man he was. Perhaps no film defines his legacy better than It's a Wonderful Life. Though it was only a modest success upon its release, it has since become a timeless masterpiece, watched by generations each holiday season. More than just a movie, it is a reflection of Stewart himself, a man who believed in goodness, integrity, and the quiet strength of everyday people. Kelly Stewart often hears from fans who say the film changed their perspective on life, much like her father changed the world through his work. But his legacy isn't just measured by his films. His military service set him apart from other Hollywood stars. He wasn't a man who merely portrayed heroes, he was one. He earned numerous military honors, including the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His bravery extended beyond the screen, proving that his commitment to duty and country was as genuine as his performances. And yet, perhaps his greatest legacy lies in the values he instilled in his family and the millions of fans who still admire him today. He lived his life with humility, never seeking attention beyond what was necessary. He valued loyalty, respect, and kindness, traits that made him more than just an actor or war hero. Kelly Stewart hopes that people remember not just the star, but the man. The father who led with quiet strength, the husband who adored his wife, the friend who never turned his back on those who needed him. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but he lived with purpose, with honor, and with a heart that left an imprint on all who knew him. The truth about Jimmy Stewart isn't just in his films, but in the lives he touched and the legacy he left behind.